So welcome everybody to the second or third ArDraw virtual kind of student collaboration and workshop session. Today we have a special guest with us, Taffy McCoy, who's going to talk to us about research and then how that moves into policy decisions and action. So I hope you're all ready and have a couple of questions that they're ready for her. Before we get going, I know we've got a lot of people on the call, but I'd love to give Taffy just a really quick idea of kind of what everyone's project is focused on. So if everyone just wants to give their name and a one sentence snippet of their research topic, that'd be great. We can get going. I usually have a beautiful alphabetical list in front of me of all of your names, and today I don't. So it's going to be just at random how I see you. So we'll start with Christina.
Hi, everyone. Excited to learn from you today, Taffy. My name is Christina Parsons. This is my second year in the ArDraw project. My project this year is focused on the impact of COVID-19 on VR service utilization for Social Security beneficiaries. So looking at RSA 911 data and analyzing COVID impacts for that.
What are our services? Rehabilitation?
There's about 31 different classifications of voc rehab services. So
V. I didn't hear the V.
VR.
Oh, I got it. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for your question.
Kelly.
Hello, everyone. So Taffy, my study is on how people who are blind or visually impaired experience relationships in text-based workspaces. So we're talking about things like the text components of Teams or Slack or social media like LinkedIn, even Facebook, email. And so it's been actually pretty fascinating. I've had quite a number of interviews, so it's been really fun. And kind of what that means for gaining and retaining employment.
Great.
Thanks, Kelly. Catherine.
Hi, hi Taffy, nice to meet you. Hi everybody.
Hi, Catherine.
My name's Catherine Hurley. I'm here for the fourth time. I'm delighted to be here with ArDraw, and my project is learning more about the experiences of those who have autism and are LGBTQ and their experiences with identity and employment.
Yeah, I've read a couple of your proposals through the years. So
great.
Good to see you, Catherine.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Catherine. I'll go to Amber.
Hi, nice to meet you. Happy to be here also.
Amber?
I am also working with the autism population, and I'm trying to identify how transportation, what barriers and facilitators transportation has that impact employment. Also looking at COVID-19 and sort of the pre-post, I hate to say post because we're still there, but kind of the pre and now effects of COVID-19 on both transportation and employment.
Interesting.
Jade?
Sorry, I'm here. I'm not as familiar with Microsoft Teams. Hi, everyone. My name is Jade Presnell. I'm with Indiana University School of Social Work. Good to see everyone. It's been a busy day, so I might turn off my camera just for a minute to eat some lunch. But I am here listening. My project is a qualitative study that is exploring direct support professionals' perspectives on supporting community and workforce inclusion for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So direct support professionals provide most of the community-based services. And of course, individuals with IDD suffer from pretty significant exclusion, particularly in the workforce. So finding ways that maybe we can help increase inclusion in the workforce, given what we can learn from direct support professionals who provide a pretty significant amount of supports to folks. So happy to be here.
Great. Happy you're doing a qualitative project.
Yeah, it's
I
fun.
have a big bias. I'm a qualitative researcher.
Okay.
And
Well,
so
if more people would participate, that would be great, but we're slowly getting there.
yeah,
As you
hard
well
time
know.
to recruit anybody, I think.
Yeah, it's tough. So, but we're moving forward.
Let's go over to Matt.
Great. Hi, my name is Matt Boris. I'm in Chicago. I'm doing a project that looks at SSI and SSDI beneficiaries. It's also qualitative interview based, looking at kind of how people understand their relationship to the workforce, particularly in relation to the various work incentive programs, both, kind of after getting into the qualifying for benefits and then thinking about, the options that they have for getting a toe back in the workforce and fears around that and things like that. So, yeah.
Sounds pretty fascinating.
I'm liking it so far. Also having some, it is taking time to recruit people, but it's starting to happen.
Good, good.
Catalina.
Hi, everybody. This is Catalina. Nice to meet you all. I'm currently a doctoral candidate at Boston University School of Social Work. And in my project, I am integrating community-based participatory research to partner with a community action team of culturally and linguistically diverse caregivers of youth and young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so together, unfortunately, they were not able to attend today given the work schedules, but together we are exploring barriers and promoting factors of culturally and linguistically diverse caregivers, immigrant caregivers of youth and young adults, particularly in the transition planning process and how that's associated with post-secondary education, vocational training, and employment opportunities. So yeah, just a pleasure to be here.
That's a big project. Yeah. Sounds good though.
We'll go to Michelle.
Are you on mute, Michelle? We're hearing something now.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm sorry, apologize. I'm Michelle Vasquez. I'm from the University of Incarnate Word in San Antonio, Texas, and we're currently using a community-based participatory action research approach, working with parents of children with autism to understand how they learn about federal programs, social service and support. We're using digital stories from our first phase of the research project and really utilizing those stories with others in the community to really think about their experiences and how they connect with different with healthcare, with systemic type of things. And so what we're hoping is to learn how the parent experiences can serve as catalysts for dialogue in the community to support policy and social change. So I'm really excited to be here because I really want to learn more about how the research can support or affect the policy changes. So thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Last but not least, we have Emily.
Hopefully people can hear and see me. Hi, I'm Emily. I'm from UC Berkeley. I'm a PhD student in sociology, and I'm using a combination of ethnographic fieldwork and qualitative interviews to compare different models of vocational rehabilitation for people with mental illnesses.
Great.
All right, thanks, Emily, and thanks so much, everybody. All right, so I think that we've got everybody. Taffy, we've met over email and, kind of virtually here, but again, my name is Eric. I'm the program coordinator for the ArdRaw Small Grant Program. You met Margaret, and you obviously know Laura, so I think we'll get ready to go. I will hand it over to you. Laura, is there anything you wanted to say first, or?
I will just say that I'm awfully glad to have all of y'all joining us today, and I am absolutely thrilled that Taffy has agreed to come and speak with y'all today. I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about her background. She's had so many different experiences and been a part of so many different exciting things, and she has just been such a wonderful resource for me personally.
Gee,
I
make
am
me
glad
blush.
to share her.
Well,
So,
thank you.
Taffy, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, I want you to see my face while I'm saying hello and stuff. I have had a some might say checkered career, but I say an exciting career. I started working with people back in the days when they called adults with cognitive developmental disabilities mentally retarded adults. That was my first special population in back in the dark ages. And then I moved to a mental health research focus for most of my other life, starting with the age of deinstitutionalization, when they were just dumping and ferrying people to communities. And I got into research because it seemed to be the broadest brush for what needed to happen. And I've become more and more interested in policy work as I've gone through, because you have to sell your ideas and present them in ways that allow uptake if we are going to make a difference in all of these diverse areas that you've talked about. So I've been at SSA now, it seems like a lifetime, but it's only been about 6 years. And I've worked as a researcher in Westat for 10 years prior to coming to SSA. So and I was a grad student, it felt like forever, as it probably feels to all of you. So I have a multifaceted perspective on a lot of things. But I'm going to share my screen now, and we can get started. Share content, presenter mode. Okay. Is it up? Oh, you probably need. Is it up there?
Not yet, but sometimes it takes a second or two. Let's see.
Oh, I must not have my trigger finger right on the right button. Share. That would help. Is it there yet? No.
Oh, it doesn't seem to be showing up. Let me know if you want me to try.
Sorry, we practiced this and everything was fine.
We did, and it was very smooth sailing. So
here, tell you what, Erica, why don't you go with your slides?
Sure.
Of mine, and I'll just go with my talking.
All right, that works for me. Can everybody see?
Yes, I can see.
Yes.
Okay. All right, it's a go. Well, on this first slide, I gave you my living life name and also my email address if you want to reach out after the presentation. But also, I really wanted to make the point right off the bat that your research projects are really critical. This is the kind of grassroots beginning research that provide the information to decision makers and the people who make the policy. And it informs both our current policy, and it also guides us in your recommendations will guide decision makers in what needs to change, where the bottlenecks are the parents learning things, are the situations for employment, if you have an autism diagnosis improving, that kind of thing. The second slide that you can now see, right? is my policy analysis slide. And I also wanted this right up front because I was amazed when I was updating my slides and references for today. I had not gotten to the CDC site lately, and they have wonderful materials. There's also a link in the reference slides that I have at the end of my show, but they have great materials on the CDC. And what I appreciate most is for me, when I'm new to a topic, it's really great to have a template that others who have gone before me can, kind of give me for a map to how to do policy analysis that's going to make a difference. And there's a wonderful guideline on the CDC pages that I really wanted to flag for you because it would fit. It's the kind of thing that fits a lot of different kinds of projects. And so I just really wanted to emphasize that now. We'll probably end up talking more about that as we go. But on the next slide, we have, these are, well, I should let you know, you probably already know this, but policy analysis has gone from kind of a side event for researchers in the last century to really a formal discipline now. And there are a variety of ways to approach it. The ones I have on this slide about the traditional approaches, basically you identified the best solution in your view based on your research, and then you undertake analyses of other solutions or your solution that you're offering. Mainstream approaches focus on who has to be acting if the policy is going to change. Who are the actors involved in making the policy and then carrying it out? And then this third box here, the interpretive approach, I anticipated, and it sounds like this probably matches most of your projects pretty well, because what you are doing in your research is for the most part, everyone is involved in framing and learning more about how the problem, in quotes, the healthcare issue or whatever that you're studying is represented, how it shows up in problems, how the policy issues that are connected to the problems, like people with cognitive disabilities might have in the workforce. This reflects a social construction of the problems. Now, I also confess, not only am I a biased qualitative researcher, I'm also a sociologist. So the social construction of problems really resonates with me. But there is an older definition or two approaches to policy analysis that I kind of keep in my head. This is from Codd, C-O-D-D, in 1988. And he puts out policy advocacy, which involves the researcher making specific policy recommendations. And then a second big swath for policy analysis is information for policy that requires you as researchers to provide the policymakers with information to enable them to revise or formulate policy. And I just like, I keep that one in my head because it's the first one kind of involves, okay, here are my recommendations based on my policy and my advocacy stance. And the second one is not only here are my recommendations, but here's the information you need to formulate or move forward on the policy. So it's kind of, I don't know, I hope the third bullet there speaks to you too, and we can talk more about that as we go. The next slide I wanted to have for you because this is there. It's a little different when you're doing policy analysis with a specific healthcare focus. And once again, your role is to help others understand how and why policies improve your health condition of interest, whether it's jobs for people with autism diagnoses or the workforce as it appears to people who are blind and it's a text-based world and they can't see, and those implications. But it also provides a way to get your information to the advocacy actors, the practitioners, as they're using these kind of recommendations. And once again, I'm just, this is a great article, this Brown article. It's really about a nutrition study they did, but I just thought, as I told Ted earlier when I talked to him about policy analysis and research, I find it very handy to have an article that you can look at where you can read about how they advocate and move forward on for this nutrition goal of theirs in this article, but it's also kind of I thought it was an excellent article for how you step through your own research and present it if you are after using your research to generate better understanding of the values, interests, and political contexts that are going to become involved in policy decisions in your area. And this is how you get from policy to advocacy, because the same information you need for the policymakers, you also need for the advocates and the practitioners in the field. So, and in these next few slides, here, we can go to the next one, Erica. None of these terms are going to amaze me, are going to amaze you or sound different to you. These are the goals of good research, always. But these are especially important for policy analysis. You need to demonstrate a strong causality between the condition you are focused on in your research and your presentation of variables that affect it. You want to establish the case that the variables you explored were, in fact, accurate measures of the theoretical constructs you're interested in. And this, the best example for that your variables accurately measure the central relationship, you want to make sure if you're using a scale of autism for symptoms or whatever, that the scales accurately measure autism and not a range of other mental health symptomatology or challenges or whatever. So if you're exploring impairment types and return to work patterns, for instance, some of you are going to be involved in that, you need to take your logical inferences from your available data and the sample size you have and the time parameters for your collection and offer reliable data that will help you operationalize your assumptions about this actually needs to happen for people to return to work. So validity is crucial, and it just takes on a special, if a policymaker is at all unsure that you have made the case, they're going to go to the next paper on their list. So that's a very important. The next one on feasibility is, this is especially acute probably for your own ARDRA projects since they're time limited, but you also need to help your policymakers or your practitioners know that what you are saying or what you're claiming or what you've researched can support the recommendations you make. Do we have is the SSA data you are looking at sufficient to really explore causal or relevant associated variables? And if your research carries policy implications, almost everybody's does, you need to draw this out. You need to be able to say that. And of course, for your ARDRA project, you want to know if it's doable within the time allowed. But this is kind of the feasibility, achievability, I think, is really important because it's kind of, you take the very core of your research or your research question. You want to say, okay, we want people to return to work if they've been out of work. That's your dependent variable. So there are thousands of variables that could matter. Causal variables might involve impairment, age, and are these variables you could add to or skip over if some are kind of redundant in your design? This is a very good question because policy people are going to be asking these questions. Did you study the right thing? Is there enough information here for me? And are there other data elements that you may want to collect to explore particular facets of your proposal through quantitative means, i.e. other data from SSA or other variables about when did they apply, when did they start becoming, when is their first date of impairment. That obviously matters to long-term trajectories for work. And qualitative data. In qualitative data, if you're looking at return to work issues, absolutely prior work history is going to be one of your questions. And the ability to engage someone in talking about, so what interrupted, if you've had a problem with keeping your jobs, what are some of those barriers? Or what helped you keep your job this time? I've seen that was, you've said this was a problem before. So I know you need and want to focus on your research question, but be alert as you go. And it sounds like some of you have already encountered this, that other things are going to come onto your radar screen as you move through your research. And you do want to be adaptable to be able, you want a design that's adaptable, or that you can at least list in your areas for future research in everyone's paper. that will make your case even better or make your recommendations even more grounded in data. And in the next slide, this about being ethical and principled in your research. As part of my background, I also started the first IRB. You probably all know what that stands for, Institutional Review Board, at a big community mental health center in Chicago in the early aughts. And every person who wanted to come and do research with us really had you always have to address these issues for an IRB, but this is really much more complex when you're in healthcare because there are so many, as you know, social determinants and so many policy actors and practitioners on these stages of where we do healthcare, where we do services like employment services that help people get back to work. Always, you need to focus on whether the changes you're talking about not only get you what you're searching for in your own area of research with your own special population, but you really need, before you offer a policy analysis or a policy recommendation to decision makers, what you want to think about too is if benefit is going to happen for my special population if these changes are made, is this going to negatively impact other people with disabilities or other people with different conditions that they're struggling with? And are there unintended consequences of what is going to help your special population? Are there unintended consequences for other people? And in this example, I kind of go through what I just said out loud. Do some policy implications suggest ethical challenges? At SSA has a program for determining the expectations for recovery from some disorders. Some disorders are just seen as unlikely ever to improve because they started in a person's youth and they were developmental disabilities, and it's programs can help, but a significant impairment will probably maintain. And yet the whole world has changed, and some of these intractable conditions that developmental disabilities have really yielded to good services and different approaches through the years. So if we're talking about current federal laws that need to equalize disability benefits across the type of impairment, regardless of expectations about recovery or when disability first arose, does the policy you are suggesting carry unintended consequences? And does the current law or the changes you might suggest in, gee, the disability application process should be different in these ways, do those kind of changes influence the autonomy of individual beneficiaries or make the disability benefit system less equitable? It's like we all do our own research in our own areas, but when you talk about policy, you have to use a broader lens, and beneficence, equity, and rights of individuals is a great broader lens to use. On the next concrete policy change map, that I'm very fond of drawing maps and trees when I'm doing research and trying to go from my research nuggets, my best findings, or the unintended consequences of findings, or whatever the it is. I try to link this. You both need, of course, always to explore the research that was done before you, but also to explicate the level of change on national, state, and local, usually, that are targets of the policy change. Who are the stakeholders? Who are the accountable stakeholders for the implementation? How long should we pilot this for 6 months before we roll out a new program? What are your timeline estimates for getting from here's a great recommendation for change? If we test this for 6 months, it'll take another 1.5 years to, fully implement it in ways we'd like to see, or at least in ways that would give us a bigger chunk of data that we could use to inform policy as we go. And it's always useful, if you know about it or find it, to think about who is going to pay and what funding streams. Is this going to be federal money, state money? If it's a local foundation, is it, are you relying on donations? And all sorts of things are involved in funding. It isn't as greatly required in policy analysis, unless you're doing it specifically for a government agency, to talk about funding streams. But you should have a general awareness of whether or not this is even possible. Are changes you might want to, or for instance, in Michelle's project with the I think it was Michelle talking to the parents of people diagnosed with autism. If you're going to be recommending a guide to parents or something like that, somebody's, if you want to produce this on a larger scale, you have to think about money. Are there foundations you might suggest who could be approached? Or it's things like that. But really the funding issues are probably not going to be as large on your projects as they are in a project that's developed that you're asking a federal agency to implement or recommending that they implement. But it's good to know who's on the stage. If you support policy changes, what actors need to be involved beyond the beneficiaries, beyond the stakeholders in the family? What other institutions or community groups are needed to make the change happen, and how can you get them in to your research? Michelle has probably already done kind of a snowball where a parent mentions an advocacy group or a special service or whatever, and then you learn about these things as you go, particularly if you're doing qualitative sections in your research. These are all your eyes and ears for how to make a policy change map that really is going to map to the community that you studied and that you can use as your template for a larger map of policy change in these areas. So the last two slides, I think there are two, are a reference list, a very handy, you know, this field is policy analysis. I could have 20 pages of references for you, but I didn't think that would be very useful. What I tried to do today is emphasize things I know you have to think about really hard if you're doing policy analysis involving the government, but also, as I mentioned early on, this second one on the second list, this Brown article, A Guide to Policy Analysis as a Research Method. Boy, I hope that's the one I'm thinking about. That's the one about the nutrition study that I just thought it would be a good template. If you're going to read any one article, instead of search for a template somewhere, I'd read that because it just, I don't know, I was very impressed with it. I found it earlier this year. I mentioned it to Ted when I worked with him, and you may get something out of it, even if it's not your particular topic. There's the next one down is the CDC reference. That's the link to all their guides, and look for, especially they have, I was going to see if I could this template, kind of a worksheet for how to do policy analysis on your project, is one of the two things that you can get from that page. And I think that could be very handy for people, especially if you're just kind of floored by the topic, or you're just so new to policy analysis that it would help. These are all good, and these are all, and I tested, we can go to the next slide. There's one from HUD on the bottom of this one. They're from a variety of education, groups, agencies that in this country, and I think the last one is wonderful stuff from Australia or the UK. But this was my pick. I have others if you ever, or these are also here. I just saw the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. That's another good source, putting evidence to work. You can tell from the titles what might be more or less handy for you. But these are kind of high level, but also pragmatic, which is what I was shooting for today. So that's pretty much it on my slides. Whoops.
Great. Thanks so much, Taffy. That was great. That was wonderful. We did have a question from one student. Matt was wondering if it's okay. Is it okay for us to share your slides with students, or if not, I can just pull the
Sure.
links. Okay, great, wonderful. So
sure.
I'll send that out to you all.
I haven't copyrighted anything yet.
Okay. All right. Well, keep me in the loop if you do, but
okay.
I'll send them out. All right. So we'll open the floor now for questions for Taffy.
Erica asked about the policy template. That's available. I couldn't fit it on a slide. So that's available from the CDC page. And the CDC link is there. And it's probably easiest if you get your own PDF from there. I just thought I wonder if I have it. Let me see. Wrong file. I wanted to show it to you. I'm in my wrong file. But I'm not finding it right this second, but I know it's on that page. So,
I can pull it up on my end quickly here. Well, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to just jump in too. No need to send it over chat.
I don't have a question necessarily, but I have a comment. I really appreciate that you brought up the ethical piece.
good.
You know, being mindful of what policy recommendations, you know, that we might make from our research and how that could potentially impact other people outside of necessarily, maybe it benefits our population that we're focusing on, but not necessarily other populations.
Right.
And I think about that particularly in the context of disability, because there is research to suggest that there's a disability hierarchy and that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities tend to be at the bottom of that. And so it's not a one size fits all, of course, but then even when we make recommendations, it could, you know, negatively impact other groups. And so being mindful of that is really important. And I appreciate that you brought that to our attention.
Well, good. We see this in action kind of at SSA because there are thousands of good ideas that we run into in research and our demonstrations. But the question of equity is alive and well and really important. And sometimes the policymaker can't accept your recommendations because they're sitting there thinking about that wider population. So it really does help you as well if you're trying to sell an idea or achieve buy-in for an idea, to know what your policy people are going to be, what are the stopgaps for them? You know, what are the stoppers for them to embrace a new idea?
I was looking for that template, and Taffy, you're absolutely right. It's probably just easier for you to hop on the CDC website. There's so many great resources on that site. It looks, I wanted to send them all, but I think that's probably just
yes, that's the problem. That's why.
Yeah.
But go to the
great.
policy area, policy analysis area, and tell you what, I know I downloaded that template just because I liked it so much, and I'll send it to Erica, and maybe she can send it on if anybody would like to see it that way. I know it's somewhere in my computer.
I know how that goes. Looks like we've got a question from Catalina.
Sure.
Hey, thank you so much again, Miriam, for such a great presentation. And I also echo the piece about ethical kind of aspect. I think my question is, we talk a lot about policy analysis, particularly in relation to legislative change most of the times.
Right.
And I was wondering if you have any examples in which you have seen, you know, different levels of policy changes, not only at when we think about, you know, municipal or state, but also different policy changes across service providers even that play such a big role in supporting the community. So I can give a quick example that can give you some context that I think that's where my question really is born out of. I think prior to this project with ARDRA, we also partnered with a group of culturally and linguistically diverse caregivers of youth with disabilities. And we, you know, through a participatory action research approach, we also, you know, work together in a qualitative study to explore language barriers in terms of accessing all these resources, particularly at in special education, which it's such an important starting point. And we actually got some findings going. We wrote a policy brief, an executive summary. We partnered with a local state advocacy agency that was actually advocating for the approval of this bill that was going to actually create standards for interpreters and translators in educational settings. And I think, the bill moved quickly before we gathered any data. And then COVID happened and all these priorities changed. And then all of a sudden it got picked up again. I know it got picked up again. And, there was actually another hearing, and we, resubmitted a lot of these research kind of analysis and findings and policy briefs and so forth. And I think it got fortunately, the funding got approved to allocate for this linguistic sort of language access piece. And I think the challenge is that it went back to the big hands of these larger entities that I think it's unsure whether they're going to have actors that are going to be enacting an ethical kind of ways to lead, or just, so I think that's one of the questions that from that story, I'm like, wow, maybe there are other ways we can influence policy at different levels, that not necessarily all these big levels that are going to be,
right.
Yes, they have a big reach and wide impact, but also how can community have more self-determination and autonomy over certain things. So anyhow, thank you for listening.
Right.
Just curious.
Right. You might be surprised by how often actual policy changes, it's not a rapid process, but by how often policy change has actually started years ago in the community with somebody's good idea. And it was brought up to an advocacy group or I work a lot with mental health stuff, so I'm familiar with the national NAMI, the people who work for and on behalf of people with serious mental illness. And here's a counter story that might answer your questions. Here's kind of a story that kind of illustrates how that can happen. There's a rehabilitation, individual placement and support model for return to work for people with serious mental illness. And that's all it started as. In the late 90s, they started building a model for the best ways to help people with serious mental illness get back to competitive employment. Over time, what's happened is that idea that they have about eight principles in the model, and they pay attention to equity, they pay attention to ethics, person-centered, they're very solid and very good. 28 randomized clinical trials defend the evidence base of this model. And what's happened has been very interesting. There are two things are still occurring even to this day, some 20 years later. There is a big push using Department of Labor, not bigwigs, that's not the right term, agency leaders who are working with helping, they have a whole Office of Disability Employment Policy there. They are very enamored with that model. They put out some grants to states that help states offer this IPS model to people to wrap it around their mental health services, in their state mental health offices. So that's one way of, you know, agency with money for this very purpose works with the states now. But without that advocacy group that started in the community, that went to NAMI, that went to the National Association of State Mental Health Providers, NASHPD, if it hadn't worked with those other advocacy groups who also had tie-ins to state agencies or to influence, to champions, people who champion this idea in the community, it would never have gotten to the point where it is now. Now there are all sorts of demonstrations and research projects going on looking at how to use this same IPS model with different populations who have different special needs, which is a wonderful thing. And it improves employment services as a whole for a lot of special populations now. But the kind of work that you have chosen, participatory action research as the basis for your project, kind of gives you a leg up on making connections in your community and to advocacy groups and to influencers who can better understand your findings and give you all sorts of great ideas how to better present this to Department of Labor or whoever can fund the next chunk of your project. So, and it's the community groups who also resonate the most, it seems to me, with equity issues. You know, usually it's people from families who are hurting that you hear from in your research when you start. You know, these are all the problems with either getting disability benefits or living with the disability or finding services so I can go forward with this, you know. So families have a acute sense of what's important and what's fair. And they too are part of that same community with these same community groups. So the sad part about that process is it often takes much longer than you would like. The good part is that it happens. It happens, and it starts with projects you are right this second working on. So don't give up hope.
Thank you.
Thank you both. I guess just a follow-up to that question, Taffy, if you sometimes we'll have a student maybe doing something a little bit more quantitative in focus, and they've been in the numbers and they've identified a problem, but the question they'll often bring to us is, okay, how, you know, I know what the problem is, but I'm not quite sure what the solution might be and how that might fit in. So would that be your recommendation to go back to an advocacy group or to do more work on kind of that grassroots level to see what the solutions are building from the ground up? Or
yeah,
what advice would you give to a student there?
I think that's both a great question and you have a great response for it, Erica. I don't know why I'm up here. Yes, take a look at your community. One of the biggest, easiest ways to learn about a community is and what their interest is and where they're active in social justice or social mediation kind of ways is to look at the kind of nonprofits and advocacy groups that are in their phone book. Of course, I show my age by that are online, that have web pages, that you see billboards for, that are on the Starbucks community. You just have to be alert if you're trying to do a better reach into your community and you haven't used a design that kind of insert you into it. And there are many ways to figure this out. I mean, to tap into what is this community struggling with? What kind of chance do we have here? How do we bring this up a level? So your advice is very good, Erica. I certainly recommend it.
Oh, thanks, Taffy. All right, let's see. Other questions. And don't feel like you have to ask a question that's really general. You can ask more questions specific to your project directly too. So okay, go ahead. I think I saw Kelly and Matt.
Yeah, so this is, I guess, related, but I'm thinking about kind of general mediums for getting information out about findings and recommendations. So maybe you're not even, I mean, you have a general idea of who your stakeholders are and who your audience is, but beyond the recommendations in a research report or a policy brief, are there any mediums through which policymakers and other stakeholders, or just you can get the general awareness out about the issue? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good question, Kelly. There are usually advocacy groups almost always have some kind of regular newsletter. Lots of times it's online now. They often have a website. They often have a little corner that says what's new, what we're working on now, what we want to work on. Those are all good sources, both to promulgate your ideas. It's because you might approach them and ask if you could do a quasi research piece, or if you really want to put some research findings and present a problem that you'd like help to solve with in a community. These little newsletters, you have to understand, people who have these huge jobs, government jobs, or even just great big CEO jobs in their own communities. Everybody takes a break during their day when they have to turn away from whatever fire is burning to look at what's come in on their email or to look at something else. You would be amazed by how many people read these little community newsletters for whatever reason. I mean, there could be absolutely legitimate, I want to see what's going on reasons, but also because it's there. So I would subscribe. If you find a website or an advocacy group that's relevant for your research, subscribe to make it a favorite on your thing so you can go, on your browser, or subscribe to a newsletter. What I was just talking about with this selling of the IPS, achieving buy-in with the IPS in more states, in one of our big demonstrations about IPS that's going on now, there's a subcontractor who is every single month, they are making calls on behalf of the project to tell them what's up, to talk about the successes, to talk about the problems. And they have little news pieces in this newsletter they send out. And this subcontract, actually, that's kind of off of one of our demonstrations, has been a very useful tool for two big national organizations. One, this National State Mental Health, NASHBD, the National Association of State Mental Health Directors, and also the VR, Council, CSAVR, I always get the acronym wrong, but it's the State Association of VR counselors and administrators. Both of those are subcontractors. If you're not in a position where you can offer them a subcontract as a student researcher, you might offer, you know, I'd like to help. I'm a good editor. Is there some way you could share my work? I'd be absolutely happy to come and talk to your parents one week, whatever it is. But to keep your eye out for that is great. It does bubble up from grass, not always top down.
Thank you both. Matt, do you have another question?
Yeah, this is a more general question, but I guess I was wondering, and I think you kind of addressed this by saying that it takes time and so on, but wondered if you had thoughts on, ways of getting ideas in when they seem to be sort of outside of the policy conversation. I mean, I say this as someone who I actually worked at Health and Human Services from 2009 to 2014, and found that quite often we were kind of saying, okay, well, what we really would need would be this, or what would really be beneficial is this. But the assistant secretary wants this, so we're going to focus on that instead. And yes. Some of that is the structure of federal bureaucracies, but or briefing. I was in a research office. We would brief congressional staff, and they would say thank you very much, and then but that wasn't what was going to play in their districts, right. And so we may as well have not been there. So I was just curious, in your career, like, have you found particular things that are more effective, or ways of kind of reframing that might yes. grab attention, or just would love your thoughts.
Well, there is an underutilized source of money for smaller projects, usually through philanthropic foundations. They're both national. There are a lot of local ones in Baltimore. NEC Casey, I think, is a big one. This is worth looking for. If you need a little bit of money, foundations are sometimes really very interested in funding small projects, since they have, tiny budgets too sometimes. That's a good link. And if you manage to get foundation money, or even if you just do it, because this would be, we'd like to put out a little notice about this to a bunch of parents. Could the people in your organization give me some feedback on this? Is there some way to make this more appealing to parents, to people who deliver these services, to interpreters who have to work with our people, or, fill in the it. But if you can establish any kind of link for any kind of reason, sometimes I made links when I was trying to get a reentry proposal, to get funders interested in a reentry proposal for people with mental illness coming back to a community. I didn't really know where to start, so I picked a Latino organization in the community who provided in-service advocacy and support to Latino people in the local prison. So I went to the local prison, I met the director, I talked a lot to the advocacy people. The sad part of the story is I didn't fly. But what I learned about the reentry process, and so many more stakeholders are involved than I ever imagined, and in different ways than I ever imagined, just trying to explore that. Now, this isn't the kind of activity you probably have time to do as a grad student, you know, to just kind of explore. But if you have a kernel of an idea, you want to sell it better, you need better connections to influencers in your communities, take the time to make some of these smaller connections, or get, you know, the other people you're working with. Look, I'll do this. I'll do these 3 organizations and you do these 3. You really need the information about the pulse of a community, if it's going to be community-based. If you're using community research to get your state or city more involved, or help you fund on an ongoing basis this kind of activity, you're going to start with your community basis to get there anyway, and so on. If you can do a state project to get the attention of feds, that's also good. But there are a lot of untapped resources and just pounding the pavement kind of connections you can make that are useful. But never underestimate the power of getting a little bit of foundation money, because just like your little ArdDraw, not so little, your ArdDraw stipends are going to help you in your own careers acquire other funding for other research you want to do because you've succeeded at this. You know, it's no different if you're trying to sell a bigger idea on a broader basis.
Thank you.
Sure.
It's a really great point, Taffy. Were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say that you can reach me by email if you want to later. I might have resources in your area, or I might not, but I'm certainly willing to talk about anything you're running into that you're at your wit's end about. So, or if you think of other questions later after today, as you get closer to trying to put this all on paper or something, I'm more than happy to help.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for that offer, Taffy. That's great, and I'm sure you'll, you know, you might be getting more emails than you bargained for, but I think that'll be, you know, really helpful. So I definitely appreciate it, and certainly appreciate you joining us here today and answering our questions and giving a great presentation. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it myself. Thank you. So good luck. Hope you get it all done on time.
It'll get done, right? Yeah.
Right.
All right. So that's probably where we'll wrap things up today. We're getting close to that end mark of 2:30. If anybody has any other questions,
I'm going to leave now.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much.
To talk amongst yourselves. Okay. Take care.
Thanks, Taffy.
Thanks, Taffy.
Real quick before we hop off, does anybody have any, you know, kind of final questions or any other comments, anything else that you want to bring to the table today while we're all together? No. All right.
I do have a question. What is our or what is our next meeting about? I guess I'm just thinking what's next.
Yeah, so our next, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought it up. Our next meeting will be in April, probably closer to the end of April, and we'll have Dr. Richard Van Doorn come on, who works, a colleague of mine at Policy Research, and he's going to talk more about the process of publishing your work and talk a little bit more about what types of journals might be helpful, and then kind of answer any questions about how to take your ArdRaw project and move it to publication. So. All right, so I'll send Taffy's notes out to you all, her slides, and I'm sure I'll be talking with you all shortly, either on a quarterly call or, you know, at some point via email. So thanks so much for hopping on today, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.
All right,
Bye,
take care,
everybody.
everybody.
Everyone.